We're back for part 2 of shame. Feels weird to be energetic and smiley talking about shame, so I'm just going to cool off for a second.
Don't know. Do we act like this is a new episode for anyone who might be listening to this episode without listening to the first one? Or do we just
So
carry on? Feels weird.
This is a 2-parter episode, so if you haven't listened to our first episode on shame, by all means, listen, because it was probably a couple of weeks ago. And we just felt like we had quite a lot to talk about, so we thought we'd separate it up. So this is part 2 on shame. Take it away, Becca.
Right, thank you. If I had a hat, I would take it off. And what's that called when you do that to someone with your hat? What is that?
Oh, I don't know.
For anyone who's listening, I'm like
Like a top, if you were having a top
taking an
hat.
imaginary hat off and tipping it towards Katy, but I don't actually know what the word is to do that. Salute? No, that's not salute, is it?
No, it's not salute.
Anyway, never mind. I will take it away. And it's actually just made me think, before we go into shame and identities, I think that's where we left the last episode. I also just want to say the last episode was more us talking about how shame showed up for us and our experiences. But I'm really aware that I don't want anybody to. I'm really aware that we spoke in quite a raw way about the ways that we viewed ourselves and some of the stories we were telling ourselves about being a bad person. And I really want to emphasize that if anybody is struggling with body image or binging or perfectionism or any of these things, we are not saying you are a bad person. We're not saying that you are like vain or shallow or greedy or any of those things. What we're saying is this is how we felt. This is the internal dialogue we had with ourselves and where shame took us. So if there's some of the things that you're saying to yourself, you're not alone. But it also doesn't have to be true either. I just really wanted to make that clear.
Well said.
Thank you. So back to where we were. We were talking about shame and identity, weren't we?
Yeah.
This episode, we're going to talk a bit more about what can help with shame. And I don't think you can talk about what can help with shame without touching on some of Brené Brown's work. I don't know. Have you read any of Brené Brown's work, Katy?
No, I haven't.
I think you'll love her stuff because she's like a researcher.
I've heard of her, but I've never actually.
Yeah. She researches into like shame and perfectionism. Like they're her like big thing. But one of the exercises that she has in her book around shame, which we can put in the show notes if anyone is interested, I'll find the name. But one of the exercises she had and that I actually found helpful for myself in recovery and working through shame. It sounds like such a simple exercise, but it was about unwanted identities. So it was like shame comes in because we fear being labeled with certain unwanted identity. So if you were to just simply write the exercise, like, I want to be perceived as, and I don't want to be perceived as. And the part that's I don't want to be perceived as is the unwanted identity that you have. So for example, it could be, I want to be perceived as having everything together and being disciplined. I don't want to be perceived as chaotic and out of control. So then, therefore, when you binge and you feel completely out of control, the reason you're feeling so much shame is because it's tapping into an identity that you really don't want to have labeled onto you. It's something that you don't see as yourself. You don't want it to be you, so you try to reject it. So you almost try to do the opposite of feeling like trying to always have everything in control and seem completely always together because you're so fearful of that unwanted identity.
I like that. It's weird.
Totally like her work.
As I listen to you explain, there is a part of me that just wants to say that I think I would have really struggled with that kind of exercise because I don't think I would have been able to separate. Like, I think I would have struggled to actually figure out, I think because it was all so enmeshed, what was actually perhaps potentially harmful for me, what was not actually authentic for me, and what was more aligned for me, because I really wanted to be this person. Like, I really wanted to be the person that had my shit together and did it effortlessly, did it in a way
Yeah.
that just was with ease. Like, I really wanted to be that person. So for me, a lot of the work was actually ex- just accepting the fact that I'm not that person, but that sounds quite harsh. But what I mean is learning what it is to be human and what are the expectations that get filtered down to us through mainstream media, through social media, through family, through friends, through TV shows, through everything that we are bombarded with. What's coming from that and what feels like it's coming from what makes sense for me.
See, I
Yeah.
think what you said there actually does really work with that exercise. Because the way I perceive that exercise isn't about, okay, so I don't want to be seen as out of control, so I better make sure I'm not. I think it's more about, okay, so I don't want to be seen as out of control. Then why? What is it about being seen as out of
Mhm.
control that makes me so fearful? Like, where does that come from? What messaging have I had that's made me think that being out of control is a bad thing? How realistic is it, you know, to always try and appear like I'm together? And then a lot of her work is about embracing like imperfection and embracing vulnerability and authenticity and like all about humanness, which is about having, sometimes we seem together and sometimes we don't, and that's
Mm,
okay. So I think what you've actually said links to the exercise, because that exercise is just the starting point to find out what it is we do fear. So then we can do all that, the rest of that stuff that you've just described.
got it. That's fine then. Who knows what I'm talking about?
You were doing it already. Didn't even need to read the books.
Like, well, I'll have you know.
What else do you think helps you with shame? Or do you think is helpful with shame in general?
What helped me from the lens of like body image, from talking about it from that perspective, was the power of information. And by that, understanding bodies and things like set point weight theory, our genetic blueprint, how that impacts our body, like getting a wider knowledge of the other factors at play that influence and contribute to body size, even things like dieting. Dieting, like yo-yo dieting and restriction itself can increase your body weight. And it was really helpful for me to see it in that way because it took a lot of the responsibility off of me because I carried so much of that. I was like, I should be this size, but my body's this size. So it's my responsibility to get it down to this size. And if it's not working, it's because I'm doing something wrong. I'm not doing this good enough. Like I was carrying that. So as I began to understand, like, oh, hang on a minute, what if there's a chance that my body just isn't designed to be this size? How does that change things? How does that help me look at things in a different way rather than carrying so much blame and feeling like this was something wrong on my part? What if this isn't something that I have as much influence over that I've been led to believe? Like, where can I
Yeah.
actually put my hand up and be like, okay, I actually don't need to carry all of this? That was so helpful to continue to get my head around because it just widened my picture. So that was so helpful with body image, really, because it felt like a phew, okay. I don't need to
Mhm.
carry all this weight on my shoulders and relinquish some of that control, surrender to it. Really, I think was really helpful with the body image piece. But, and a similar thing with food in that understanding the biological, psychological, and physiological response of restriction, whether that's physical restriction or mental restriction, what's actually happening outside of my conscious mind that's not something that I can control. and it's going on and it's something that's wired into my body, the impact of restriction, what that does to a body, and understanding again that my body doesn't know that I want it to be size X. Like, it doesn't know that I think that this much is too much food or that I should. It doesn't know this. It's working as it's working. So, both of those pieces, as I said, gathering information and more understanding about what I was experiencing and knowledge of my body really helped me detach a little bit and surrender, I would say.
I think psychoeducation can be really powerful for that because exactly what you've described. I think when we are in shame, the world becomes a very small place. It becomes a little pit of darkness that we're sitting in on our own. And we've only got our perspective on it when we're in that little bubble, so we can like completely get lost in our own narrative and all the story that we're telling ourselves. Whereas psychoeducation pulls us out of that into bigger picture. And I think it then makes us think it's not something wrong with me. If this is actually what is biologically going on, or this is a normal psychological reaction to X, Y, Z, maybe I'm not fundamentally flawed. Maybe this is just a normal reaction that's uncomfortable and not really something that I want, but something I can change. I think that's what it does. It opens us up to be like, this can change because it's not just me that's broken here.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you also say the pieces that we were talking about earlier and even in the previous episode, like where the shame really, the shame spirals that you were talking about and how we attach to all of these things, I think dissecting that and breaking that down is a real like slow burn. That is not something that's easy to do, but just changing, just understanding it and recognizing the part of you that's wanting something in those moments, whether it makes sense to you or not, to just slightly open the door for some compassion. I found that really helpful as well. Understanding, okay, well, there's a part of me that really, really identifies with having this fit aesthetic, and this is a part of who I am, and it feels really scary that without this, I don't know who I am. I can't necessarily fix that right now, nor is it something you can just switch, but can I offer myself some understanding and compassion that this is really rooted in safety and there's more to this than I realize, and it's understandable why I'm finding this hard or why I'm experiencing it like this.
Absolutely. I think compassion and shame, like self-compassion and shame, they can't exist together, because with self-compassion, we're looking at, okay, maybe why am I feeling this way? What's going on here? What do I need? What am I trying to protect myself from? And when you speak to yourself in that way, offering like kind of kindness, shame just can't exist because shame is the complete opposite of it, right?
Yes.
So I think so. I grew up in an environment which shame was used as like a behavioral management tactic, like at home, and I can see how that has been something that's gone on for generations in my family. And that's not me putting blame on like my parents or my grandparents or anything like that. Because I think actually it's been a very common tactic that's been used with children for many generations. So it's nobody's fault. It's just something that people have learned. If this is how, you know, you were disciplined as a child through shame, then it's natural that you are going to try and shame yourself But realizing that made me feel like there was less wrong with me. And it made me have so much compassion for myself to
Mm-hmm.
see the role that I'd played and why I might be doing that to myself. Then it also opened me up to, do I want to continue doing this? Does it actually work? Does it actually make me feel like good? Is it a nice way to talk to myself? No. If I'm doing it to myself, I then have the choice to break that and to stop doing
Mm-hmm.
that to myself.
Yes. Yeah. Do you know what? It made me think of a client that I have currently. We've been working together for probably about 6 months now. And I noticed it's primarily WhatsApp. We have sort of a check in once a month. But I noticed when we first started working together that she would go quiet on WhatsApp for a few days. Which wasn't normal for her. Normally it's so every day we would touch base and this, that, and the other. And realized through working together and talking together that the silence would come after she would binge, right? She would withdraw, and shame tells her to hide. Shame tells her to keep this to herself. Shame tells her that she's done something wrong and she wouldn't be accepted. She wouldn't be loved if she talked about this. And just the WhatsApp space with her over time, like building that safe back and forth, it took a lot of time, but getting to the point where post binge, she can now message, she can reach out, she can say, hey, this has just happened to me. I've just done this. Bringing it to the light, bringing it out into the open when shame tells you to do the complete opposite, when shame wants you to stay small and keep hidden. This is what I love about the WhatsApp. It's like helping offer people that kind of that safe space of like, hey, come here. I'm with you. I see you. I see you with all of this and I'm still here and I don't think any differently. It doesn't change anything. Obviously, that is something like in her instance, it took months to get to that point where she felt like she could actually talk about it. But it's like doing the opposite to what shame is telling you. Just similar to what you're saying. Shame for me told me that I had to stay small, that I had to stay silent. I had to keep myself filtered and diluted in order to be accepted. And slowly stepping out of that to begin to think, oh, okay, well, I'm doing this thing and I'm still okay. And nothing's really changed. And maybe I'm not this terrible person. Maybe I'm not this, that, and the other. To create that lived experience for yourself over a period of time, I think is really, really powerful.
Yeah, it is. And it takes so much courage because
Yeah.
to be that vulnerable with another person. Because if you're going to tell someone that you something about yourself that you feel so deeply ashamed of, you are basically saying to someone, I'm about to bear all here. And I'm absolutely petrified that you are going to reject me. How much fucking courage does that take?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I
Oh,
mean?
I know. Yeah.
Well, it is so powerful to do that with someone that you feel safe with, you feel like you can trust. I think that's the really important thing because if you do that with someone that you don't feel safe with, it may not be as effective. So I think it's about
Yes.
building that safety and trust with that person first and then feeling able to do it. But I think naming it really helps me. Like if I'm going to tell someone, I actually, it's really interesting that we're talking about shame this week because I've had an incident recently where I felt quite ashamed of myself for something and I wanted to speak to Will about it. But I was in that like push pull resistance being like, I know if I speak to him about this, it's going to help. It's going to alleviate the shame. But fear is so strong right now. Anyway, we had the conversation. But what helped me was to actually name it to say, I want to speak to you about something, but it's something I feel very ashamed of. Because then I've feels for me, put a disclaimer out there that like, I am being vulnerable right now. So please handle me gently. I
Yes.
think that's helpful to just use those words.
Yes.
And when I spoke about it, and I've done this in the past, and I did it, this kind of goes back to the episode where we were talking about what you do post binge, where I would read out how much I'd eaten too. I think for me, talking about something I feel very ashamed of, it really helps me to write it down and then to read it out. So if I've written down in a journal everything I'm feeling and why I'm feeling ashamed, that for me feels easier to just read that out to someone than to have to find the words in the moment.
Yes, I do a similar thing, but I write it on my notes on my phone. And
Mhm.
sometimes I need to send something as a text. Or
Yeah.
or there were times where I would say, not so much anymore when I was first with Stuart, but I remember I would say to someone like, okay, just turn around, don't look at me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So not look at me. Just in the beginning phase, now because it feels like a safe space, now I can talk to him. But in the beginning, I was like, I'm just going to dip my toe in here. So I need you to not look at me while I have this conversation with you, because this is a really vulnerable thing for me to talk about. And I need to be able to speak this. And I can't do that if I know I'm being looked at.
Yeah. And then once you've got over that initial hurdle and you've read out whatever it is you've written down or you've said it and the person hasn't been looking, then when they haven't ran away and rejected you, you feel safe enough to go into maybe the nuance and the messiness and get into
Yeah.
the conversation because you know that they're still there. They're still there. They're going to
Yeah.
sit in that shit with you.
Yes. And I feel the need to say that I can name how lucky I am to be able to have that in my relationship, and that I am sure that there are listeners who have had very different experiences, and how that just, it digs you further into shame, doesn't it? When you reach out and you are vulnerable and someone doesn't respond in a way that's helpful, and the impact that has, I think that closes you off even more, doesn't it?
You know, or responds in a way that makes you feel more ashamed. Like I
Mhm.
remember speaking to a friend, like a old friend, former friend, they're not my friend anymore. Um, not
Is this why?
necessarily because of this, not necessarily because of this situation. Just we actually went separate ways, and um, opening up to her about my binging, and I don't know if I've mentioned this before on the podcast or not. And her response was, "Do you know what your problem is? You just love food too much." It made me sink further into the shame because I was thinking, this is what I'm ashamed of. The fact that I feel like I'm really gluttonous and I just can't stop myself with these foods. And you saying I love food too much is making me feel like, I can't say making me feel because no one can make you feel anything, but it added to the shame because it reinforced what I thought about myself, like those shameful things I thought about myself. So that's why I think that the finding someone you really trust and have built that safety with first is really important. And you don't need many people, I think. I don't think you need many people in your life that you have that relationship, even if you just have one person you feel you can do that with. And even if that's like a therapist or a coach, because there is a really good quote. There's a really good quote in that Brene Brown book. I can't remember what it is, but it's something like, I highlighted it ages ago when I read it. I remember highlighting it, being like, I will remember that quote forever. And now I can't remember it exactly word for word. But it's something like, shame is made between people because of all the expectations we discussed earlier. Shame is made between people, but it's healed or it's broken between people too. Because shame is so much about being connected or disconnected to people that
Yeah.
it builds up the shame and it breaks down the shame too. And I
Yeah.
think that's what we're both talking about here, the
Mhm.
importance of speaking to other people. And you went, why am I smiling whilst I'm talking about shame? And I'm thinking the reason we're shocked before when we were talking about our experiences of how we felt when we were experiencing shame, neither of us was really smiling. It was quite like heavy and serious. But now we're
Yes.
talking about sharing it. There's a lightness. Like I feel like a lightness in my body. I feel much more like openness and like joyfulness and connection. Okay.
Yeah. Because I think we've both changed our relationship to shame, haven't we? Although I still experience shame, and there is that familiarity to it. Normally now, if I experience shame in the heavy way, it's normally as a result of if I'm going through a bout of depression. They coexist together for me. But I'm familiar with how I feel shame, how I feel it in my body, how it makes me feel like I'm about to be enveloped in something and I feel the need to hide and I can name it as shame. And
Mhm.
so I'm like, okay, this is what this emotion is. I know this feeling, and I also know that this will pass. And I also know that although although I'm feeling like I need to do this, the best thing for me to do is the opposite. And like seeking connection is one of the best things for me to do. Even outside of talking about it, even just like the physical contact of hugging, that reconnecting.
Yeah, I agree that being able to identify shame when it comes up is maybe the first step and before any of the other stuff,
Hmm.
because it can be so consuming, shame. And I actually think there is research out there to show that when we are feeling shame, we go into our like
Yeah.
flight, fight, freeze response. That's actually the nervous system state that we go into when we're experiencing shame.
Yeah.
It can feel like we it can be very hard to not realize we're in the shame because we've actually shifted into a whole sort of different nervous like a different state of our nervous system, and we can just shut down, and our kind of rational or like way of thinking is less switched on. So that's why I think it can be really easy to get caught out of being like, oh shit, I'm in shame and I didn't even realize it. So I think one of the first things is helpful is learning like, what does shame feel like for me? In what situations am I more likely to feel shame in? How am I likely to react when shame is happening? What emotions come alongside shame? You can develop that big like awareness of shame, even if we suddenly get pulled into it and we're less like switched on. We have that knowledge can help us go, that's what's going on. Now I know that's what's going on. Okay.
Yes. I experience it as a freeze. For me, wanting to hide, crawling into bed, feeling like everything slows down, like I'm finding it hard to just go about my day, and recognizing the feelings through my body, how I'm noticing it viscerally, is such an indicator of, okay, something else is going on here. And if I don't have my full brain online, then maybe now's not the time to be making harsh judgments about myself.
Yeah. Yeah. There's there is a doctor who has a theory about that, I think, which is like different ways we respond to shame. And one of them's to, is it like to move away? To move away is the
Mhm.
one that you described there. I'm going to withdraw, I'm going to isolate, I'm going to shut
Yes.
down, freeze.
Yeah.
And then there's to move against it, which is to start like attacking other people or trying
Okay.
to have power other people. And I can move between those two. Generally,
Ooh.
if it's someone, I'd say I'm more of a move away, as in I want to isolate, withdraw, don't really want to have contact with people. But if it's someone that's very close to me, for example, like Will, like someone who I live with, I can slip into that move against, which is like to attack and start to push it a little bit onto him when it's really about me, but I want to put it
Mhm.
on him and make out it's like actually about him and something he did when it's not. What's the other one? Can't remember it. Move away. Oh, and move towards. Move towards is the other one where because we feel so shameful, we then try to go into like people pleasing and accommodating others, which I
Yeah, I can
don't
do
sort
that.
of relate to that as
Mm.
much, I don't think.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of shame, how would that work with shame for you?
The way I think about it when you spoke about it then is when I feel that shame and I go into myself and I want to hide, people pleasing and focusing on other people helps me remain feeling small. I can tell I'm pushing down what I need and what makes sense for me because it feels like what I need doesn't matter. It's not important. Keep it down. Let's make sure everyone else is okay. So it feels like self abandonment.
Yeah, I can see that. I get that now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't relate to that so much. I feel like I tend
Why does that not surprise me? Like, no, I'm feisty. I'm like, "Oh." I just go in myself.
I'm not saying I've never been a people pleaser or fallen into those tendencies at all, but I think when it comes to shame, I either isolate or attack.
Mm.
But just know if I attack you and I'm in a shame spiral, it's only because I feel really comfortable at my around you.
Oh, I'll be so honoured when that finally happens. I'll be like cheering you on. I'll be like, good for you. You've got this. Don't worry.
That's funny. Anything else that you want to add about what helps with shame for you?
I don't think so. I think I've covered everything that I had made notes about.
The only other thing I perhaps wanted to touch on with shame, what helps, is I think that shame links quite strongly to all or nothing thinking. So if
Hmm.
you haven't listened to our episode on all or nothing thinking, do that then. How good was that?
What episode number is it, Becca? 4?
Oh no, six. Six,
Oh.
maybe? I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. Um, no, but in all seriousness, I think it links to all or nothing thinking. Or for me anyway, it does. And the way I've come to this realization is because, again, I see it in my dad and my gran that they are both characters that have very strong, like morals, really strong moral compass and really strong sense of injustice and what is right and what is wrong. And I actually think that's a really, in many senses, having really strong morals is a great quality. So I'm not saying that this is a bad thing in either
Mhm.
of them. I actually think it can be a really good strength. And people who have strong morals often have a lot of integrity too. But what I think can sometimes happen is if we have a really strong moral compass, that's in like overdrive, then we can become very rigid in what is
Mm.
right and what is wrong and what is good and what is bad. And that's when that binary thinking, that all or nothing kind of thinking comes into play. And this is where I see it links to shame, because I think if we can become really rigid in that good or bad, this is right or this is wrong, we're missing a whole area of nuance. Why did someone do that? What was going on? That kind of gray area of the murkiness of emotions and just humanness and reality, that if we've done something that we think is bad, then we are bad. And if we've done something that we see as good, then we are good. Rather than being like, actually, I could be a good person and perhaps done something. But that's how I see the link between shame and the binary thinking. And I think I'd have fallen into that in the past with food, in having such rigid rules around food of what is a good food and what is a bad food. So therefore, if I eat that food, then I'm actually a bad person, rather than having this kind of more nuanced approach to food.
Yeah, but it has to look like this or I don't want it. And I
Mm,
experience that
yeah,
now in life. I have to be wary of it,
yeah,
that extremism thinking.
yeah. Or I have to look like this because looking like this is good. And if I don't look like this, then I'm bad. It can that, and then it just makes sense to me that binary thinking can lead to shame.
Yes.
And I just thought I wanted to pop that in before we finished today, in case it's the nugget that somebody needed. The nugget of information that someone, yes, that's what I needed. I've listened for 2 hours just to get that one bit. Thank you.
And now they can go and listen to the All or Nothing episode if they haven't yet.
Yes, exactly. Please
'Cause
do that. Yeah.
yeah.
I hope it's been helpful for people to listen to our experiences of shame and maybe help us.
I feel like I don't even remember what I said, which is weird.
Feel like that a lot. Then I listen, then I edit it later, and I'm like, oh, that sounded good. Oh, sure about that bit.
Oh,
But
wasn't my strongest point.
do you know what? Those bits that I feel like were not my strongest points, we're going to keep in the name of vulnerability and not being perfect.
Yes, exactly. In the name of denying perfectionism. Thanks, Becca.
Thank you for your vulnerability today, Katie. I appreciate that.
I really enjoy listening to your experience, especially when it's different to mine.
Yeah,
I really
same. I
enjoy
find
that.
that really interesting when it's different. And I find it interesting when we have conversation and it sparks a new thought, and I might not actually get to make full sense of that thought in the episode. I like it when you ask me a question or you say something that makes me go, oh, yeah,
Yes.
really think about that.
Yeah. Doesn't always give me time to articulate a complete thought, but
Yeah. Oh, is there anything that you want listeners to take away before we finish today?
good question. We have said a lot, to be fair. We've talked for like
I don't
4
want to
hours,
sound a
haven't
bit
we?
wanky and generic, but just you're not alone. If you feel ashamed of yourself, you're not alone. And
Yeah, it's now the time to plug my WhatsApp support.
yeah, we've all got a shame gremlin inside us somewhere.
We do.
So let's let all our little shame gremlins become friends. And if you would like one-on WhatsApp support, Katie is available.
We are so leaving it there because that is great. I love that. Thanks.
See you in the next one.
Bye.